everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. I'd like to answer a question that recently has been asked of me, whether non-binary identity tends to be a stepping stone into a binary identity. And I think it's a very important question. It's a question that tends to be asked by either non-binary or transgender individuals, as well as it tends to be a question that is a lot of times I see being utilized by people who want to invalidate non-binary identity. And I'd like to speak about that question a little bit more in detail today. This question, whether non-binary identity tends to be a stepping stone into binary identity, is not an easy one to answer. Reason being because it tends to fall into various categories. And in my professional experience, I've seen this fall in at least 3 categories. I'm sure there's more categories out there, but these are the 3 most common ones that I have observed. So category number 1 are individuals who have always identified as non-binary and will always continue to identify as non-binary. There's individuals who have existed throughout the course of a history and exist today. In other words, these are people who identify as non-binary and that's their sense of identity, which will maintain static and which will maintain the same throughout their lives, throughout the developmental stages, throughout their sense of self, sense of who they are. So in other words, these are people who identify as non-binary and nothing is going to change their identity. That's who they are and that's how they see themselves, the same way as I identify as a cis woman, and so far, I'm in my 40s, nothing has changed that, and I'm not foreseeing anything changing, but let's keep the doors open. But still, for those people, their identity is going to maintain constant throughout their lives, okay? Group number two are individuals who start exploring their gender and start identifying as non-binary, and as they explore their gender, and as they learn more about themselves, interaction with their gender identity and the world, with their gender expression and gender roles they occupy, as a result, sometimes those people will, through the sheer force of those gender experiences, will realize that they may be leaning more toward one binary than the other. So in other words, they may realize that they're actually identifying more toward masculine or feminine end of a spectrum. But to say that non-binary was a stepping stone, as if non-binary is something like a springboard that everybody's comfortable from, but only to then end up on one spectrum or another, is inaccurate. What happens is that by starting to broaden your gender lens, by starting to explore your gender, like I said, your gender expression, your gender role, a person just realizes that they're actually moving more into one segment versus the other as a byproduct of learning about themselves. So that's category number 2. People who start off at one gender expression, then they may shift to another spectrum of gender identity. And there's nothing wrong with that because gender is incredibly complex. And it can be very difficult at the outset to understand your own sense of gender, especially if you are growing up in an environment that is, I'd say, very conservative, doesn't really have the language, doesn't allow the environment for you to express who you are. As a result, it can be very confusing. Just analogies to sexuality, not that they're the same, they're not, but to make an analogy to sexuality, one's sexuality may start off as being attracted to particular individuals only to shift throughout their life as part of their life experiences and explorations, and there's nothing wrong with them. So to say that a heteronormative sexual experiences is a stepping stone to something else would also be inaccurate. So that's group number 2. In other words, these are people whose gender tends to change as a result of their experiences. Now, group number 3 are individuals who identify as non-binary and are truly non-binary in the sense of their gender identity, but make a decision to go to one end of a spectrum or another, and oftentimes they make a decision not because they identify with that binary. In my experience, they make a decision to go more towards one end or another of the binary, because the world today doesn't have societal cues for non-binary identity. As a result, it becomes very difficult. Every time you go out there and you present as non-binary, people are gendering you either by one or another binary, which is inaccurate and doesn't really define how you see yourself and how you feel on the inside. As a result, what I call is non-binary people take this emotional beating. It's as if you're going out there and the world is punching you constantly by their own binary perception, and you end up coming home bruised up only to wake up and do it again and again and again. And for a lot of non-binary people, it can become incredibly difficult and incredibly painful to constantly reaffirm. It's almost as if you're coming out every single time by telling people that you identify as non-binary and what your preferred pronouns are. And for some people, it takes a toll on them because we're all humans. And if I had to go every single day and to defend and prove a sense of who I am, I can tell you right now, it will take a toll on me. As a result, a lot of people make a choice to go to one binary or another just because they got overwhelmed, they're tired of it, they don't want to live like that. Now, I personally have a video talking about it. Many of you watching it may have seen it, where I personally think that that's, I really don't wish people would take the choice, although I respect everybody's choices, only because they're going from one gender identity into a gender identity that is now not only perhaps maybe perceived as easier because now the world can read societal cues in accordance to the gender you're presenting, but even more difficult because they're constantly reading something that is deeply inaccurate and not how you really feel on the inside and not how you see yourself. So those are the three categories that I see in terms of is non-binary identity a stepping stone. For majority of people I've seen, it is not a stepping stone into anything. For majority of people that I've seen, if they identify as non-binary, they continue to identify as non-binary and their gender identity does not tend to change and they know who they are. For a few small individuals that I've seen, again, it's not that it's stepping stone, but it's that because you're starting to explore and you're starting to explore your relationship to your gender, you may learn more about yourself. You may come to information you didn't have about yourself before. And for very few individuals, they make a choice out of necessity to step into one binary or another only because society lacks those cues. So hopefully that answers your questions. If you're watching this and you identify as non-binary, comment below. Let me know how you feel, whether your sense of identity tends to be static and the same throughout the time, and I bet for most of you it is. And if you're watching this and if you realized that at first you identify as gender non-binary, only later to realize through the sheer course of experiences that you do lean towards one binary or another, share below. Comment below, let me know. I love reading all of you guys' comments, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.